Morning, Mark Scheibmeyer, the city hearing examiner. Been asked to convene two public hearings this morning. The first being a public hearing for consideration of a preliminary plat referred to as Country Meadows Estates Phase Number 1. For property located at the southeast corner of the intersection of Vancil Court Southeast and Vancil Road. It bears the city's number 2023.016. In advance of today's hearing, I received the staff reports and as amended yesterday by Tammy Barraconi, consulting planner or consulting planner. Also present is Clayton Weeby, senior planner. Is that the term?
Yeah, let's go with that. I'm an assistant planner.
All right. And I reviewed both the original staff report as well as the as revised report received yesterday, and all exhibits that were attached to either report, and I have undertaken an independent site inspection. I did that this morning. The purpose of this hearing, as most know, is threefold. It's to hear from staff regarding the application and their recommendations, followed then by an opportunity for the applicant, in this case Copper Ridge, to add to or subtract from what the city has presented, followed then by an opportunity for the public to be heard. I'm not certain if there are members of the public wishing to be heard today. We'll find out. If there are not too many rules, it's a relatively small crowd, assuming not much addition remotely, if there is remote. And so I'm not imposing time limitations on the length of testimony. Would invite you to recognize that the purpose of all testimony is to apply to the subdivision requirements. And so try to stay on track on that issue to the best extent possible. But again, I'm not imposing restrictions on the length. And I have reviewed all of the public testimony public comment previously received, and I'm taking that into consideration as well. All those who testify today will do so under oath, and I will speak at the podium, or staff will speak at their desk. So let's get underway with city staff. That would be Ms. Barraconi. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay.
Mr. Scheibmeyer, I'd like to start by asking that the staff report and attachments be entered into the record, please.
Yes, thank you. So the staff report as revised and all attachments to it will be recognized as exhibits. And that list is found in the report. So I will identify all those as exhibits. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the first project up today is Phase 1 of Meadow Estates. The project is 59 units in size, 59 single-family homes. It's located at the corner of Vancil Road and Vancil Court. Zoning is an R6, which is a medium-density residential. And the plans are to begin this project, if approved, in the fall of 2024. This project was submitted on November 1st of declared complete on November 1st of 2023, with the public comment period for the notice of application ending on December 1st, 2023. A DNS was issued for the SEPA determination on March 7th of 2024. And a public notice for this hearing went out on May 9th. The project is concurrent with water and sewer, with the water main being extended through Tract C and tying in on Vancil Road. Impact fees are due at the time of building permit. It is important to note that this area was recently annexed into the city in 2023. And it will be accessed on Vancil Road.
Oh,
that's it for me.
Okay. All right.
Yep,
Thank
sorry.
you. All right. And I do appreciate the additional material provided by the addendum to the staff report yesterday. It answered a number of questions I had. Tell me a little bit more about trees. The information relating to this phase 2 speaks of addressing tree issues by placing them on this phase. So what's the what's the relationship between the two phases relative to trees?
Relative to trees, are we talking the removal of trees or are you talking about the landscaping trees?
I'm referring to significant trees and the obligations relating to significant trees.
I have to admit, I don't know the answer to that question and I will defer it to the applicant.
Okay. So phase two involves the removal of a significant number of significant trees. And so that invokes an obligation to replace, and it suggests that that's happening on phase one. So again, that would be a matter I would ask the applicant about rather than the city.
Yes, because the landscaping plan, it hasn't been formalized and won't be formalized until the time of the civil plans.
Is there some preliminary landscaping concepts? I noticed some of the site maps do identify.
Yes, they're very preliminary, excuse me.
So for example, sheet C 6.1 does identify frontage landscaping and support on the internal streets. And nothing again is shown along South Fulton. We know what was envisioned as landscaping along that South Fulton.
And again, as you noted earlier, there is no identification of the species of trees, the size of the trees. So those are things that will be formalized at the time that the formal landscaping plan has been
Recognized, but is there? Let me ask something slightly different. Under Yelm's subdivision regulations, fencing, perimeter fencing can constitute required landscaping. Do you know if along the south boundary of the project, it was envisioned that fencing would constitute the landscaping?
I believe it was fencing that was envisioned, yes.
Do you know whether fencing is envisioned on the rear lot lines of these properties? And since it's designed as to lots will be adjoining each other to the rear, do you know if there's rear fencing?
I am not aware of that one.
Let's talk about the tracks a little bit. Tract C is defined as open space. Is that also the stormwater tract?
I believe that we identified D and E as. Let me look at my notes here. I apologize. Let's not let one quiet on me.
D and E are sidewalks, or what look like pedestrian access track.
Okay. I'm checking my notes here to see.
Track C is southwest of the cul-de-sac.
So yes, tract A is landscaping tract. Tract B is also landscaping. Tract C is open space and an active recreational park.
Slow down for just a second.
Okay.
So A and B are landscaping tracks along Vansel.
Correct.
So, Ms. Barconi, how's that envisioned? So separate from, is that envisioned to be separate from the frontage street improvements expected along Vansel? In other words, along Vansel, I would expect curb, gutter, sidewalks, and landscaping strip. In addition to the Vansel Road landscaping strip, would this be a secondary landscape buffer? Okay. All right, and then C is again, as you indicated, both open space and
And an active recreation park. And the proposal in there will be what I commonly refer to as tot lots or small playground apparatus.
Right, and you've added that as a condition of approval, that there be some form of recreation at that location. Okay. And can I safely assume that tracks E and D are intended as pedestrian accesses to?
I have track D and E as open space and off-road footpath.
Right. Okay.
Tract F, I show as the future right-of-way dedication. Can't even speak today. For a transportation project entitled Yelm Loop Phase 3.
It's that.
We're gonna zoom in on it here,
So,
yeah.
The south piece along the south. Oh, okay, so it doesn't say tract F, but that's what it is.
That's what it is, yeah.
Okay. And so, tell me more about what Yelm Loop Phase 3 is. Is that just a common road for future subdivision to the south and east?
I'm actually gonna defer that to the city engineer because that is beyond my scope of.
I'm sorry, remind me of your.
My name is Reza.
Let's have you sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
So tell me a little bit about Yelm Loop Phase 3.
So Yelm Loop Phase 3 is gonna be connecting, continue from the Yelm Loop Phase 2, which is gonna be connecting from the Walmart all the way to 507.
So it's a significant arterial envisioned
Yes.
downstream. Okay. And as a result of that, any one would be cautious about imposing landscaping along the south boundary of this until it's better determined how and when that roadway may be constructed.
So the road design is gonna be further in the road, because right now we have only we don't even have a concept design for that one.
Is it within the 6-year transportation plan?
Yes. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm fighting a cold today that is making it difficult to talk. And so a time frame for it's difficult to provide one, although it's in the transportation plan. Beyond that, it's difficult to determine any time. Okay. And again, Ms. Bertling, no critical areas on or near the site, correct?
That is correct, yes.
I don't know if this is a question for you or for the city engineer. And it sort of ties into the next phase as well, to some extent. What's the direction the city is envisioning itself headed toward? Is it moving to the southeast in this direction such that this is becoming an increasingly developable part of the city? I don't know if that's
Yeah, I don't know what the vision for the city is.
how much has been recently annexed in it.
So I know that this site was annexed in 2023, this along with phase 1. Were both annexed in 2023. Everything south of this has not been annexed yet.
Okay, so this is the extreme boundary, or this is the outer edge of the southern boundary. Okay. And There is, some amount of, grading and filling. Is it all within a city? I'm not familiar with Yelm's grade and fill limitations, but, are there any? Maybe I'll ask the engineer, do you envision any grade and fill maximum issues, affecting this project?
So we don't have any grading permit and we don't have any specific for city of Yelm requirement for grading.
Okay, so there is no, maximum allowed, cut, on a project?
Yes.
Okay. Will this project require the dedication of any right of way along Vansel?
Yes, they do.
And how much land would be dedicated? The applicant proposes to be 13 feet dedicated land. Is that found consistent with the city's expectation?
Yes.
Okay. I'll find out from the applicant. And has a location for fire hydrants been determined, or is that to be determined during
It's gonna be,
today's review?
so it's gonna be determined during the civil plan review.
Oh, great. What is the thinking and the purpose of the particular design which does not provide for that road C to connect to Vansel? If it did, there would be this, and if phase two was constructed, there would be this direct connection from Morris to Vansel. Is that an undesirable result in the city's viewpoint?
So I can refer it to the applicant because that's what he's proposing it, but he's, I guess, he can talk from himself.
Well, I'll come back to the applicant. in a
But
minute.
the idea was that they didn't want to have it through a street as a result for kind of traffic calming.
Okay, so it's intended as a traffic calming device.
So if it, yeah. not
And
straight to street.
as the city's engineer, are you on board with that notion?
Yes.
Okay. So the last question I had might be a Ms. Barricone question. It might be the engineer's question. It might be Mr. Weeby's question. Safe walking routes in the broader sense for this and the adjoining properties, they are addressed in the addendum. And they speak to future provisions for safe walking.
Correct.
As well as to some extent, utilizing the internal sidewalks within these projects, but tell me a little bit more as to what the city, well, let me set the table on this question a bit. It seems somewhat obvious that what had been a rural school has now become an urban school, that it's a Pioneer, Prairie, thank you. Envisioned as a rural school is now being swept into the city's plans with not a single sidewalk to be found within a mile of it. And so, leading to this potentially tragic situation where we're putting kids within easy walking distance of it and yet no safe way to get there. And so, the state subdivision statute requires consideration of safe walking in some provision for it. We don't have that yet. How do we get from A to B? How do we get from where we are to where we ultimately need to be, for being able to walk? Very elementary.
And I think that that's probably an appropriate question for the city engineer, because I don't know long-term. To me, that is part of the transportation plan. So I'm not sure what long-term what the city has planned.
So the answer would be what?
I don't have any answer right now, and I think that when they the traffic impact analysis that they did, which I didn't review, it's gonna be through the third. It did through the third party review, and then I think that they consider that one. I'm not sure.
So, let me go back to the addendum to your report yesterday. What the city declares. Contribute to an eventual safe walking route to schools program. That this development would make a contribution to that program. So what is the city envisioning as a program? What might be the contribution to it?
Well, definitely they've got the dedication of the right of way for Vansel Road itself that they will participate in. Beyond that, I'm at a loss to really explain what that looks like.
Yes, Mr. Reeve, let's have you sworn. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. The city's stance on this is that, unfortunately, the rest of Morris Road to the south of the proposed development lies within unincorporated Thurston County. It is a county road. But the idea is that, with Country Meadows Estates Phase 2 providing sidewalk along that stretch of Morris, there is the potential for, in the future, with additional annexations to the city, that when the properties to the south are developed, at that time, they would be required to continue the sidewalk from Country Meadows Estates Phase 2 to the south, and kind of continue as additional links in the chain to eventually provide a safe walking route to school.
So safe walking routes are one of the areas in which cities, hearing examiners, can impose off-site obligations. We can, where normally all the required improvements have to be on-site. We can make developers develop property off-site within a public right-of-way. So I'm not seeing that. I can't impose that here where the property is not within city limits. But I think the city's approach of it mandating dedicated sidewalk as a condition of annexation may be working toward achieving safe walking routes. And we're on the wrong project for some of this discussion. But there is the additional concern that there's no way to cross Morris to get to the side where the school is. It's not just a matter of walking down the road on a street with no protected shoulder, but it's somehow getting across the street that has massive traffic and no traffic control. So anyway, that's a discussion we may return to in phase 2. I think that concludes the question I've got for city staff. So we'll turn to the applicant, Copper Ridge. I assume that's through Mr. Mann. Is that through anyone else then? Are you envisioning to being the representative for that today?
Yeah. Yeah, we can end it.
Let's get you.
Yeah,
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do, thank you.
You've heard the city's presentation, you're familiar with its staff report as revised, you've heard some of my heard my questioning of city staff. You might want to take all that in consideration in any presentation.
Yeah. Absolutely. So first and foremost, I want to make sure that we're understanding these phases are independent of each other, different ownership groups. So while Copper Ridge LLC is the future owner and developer, these projects need to work independent of each other. So when we look at phase one, we really need to make sure that we're addressing phase one impacts in this discussion.
That is a very important point to make. I appreciate that. I tend to fade away from that idea, and then bringing it back to my focus is appreciated because it's easy to start making decisions, melting the two together, and I need to be cautious not to do that.
So I think that's the kind of key in that vein. I'll just jump straight to the first question that you brought up was in relation to trees from phase two and phase one. They're independent. There are no trees being proposed from phase two to be planted on phase one. So any removal of trees on phase two will ultimately need to be addressed as part of phase two.
Okay, so what was I reading in phase two plans that talked about allocating trees to phase one?
Originally, when phase two was drawn up, there was some concern that with the number of trees, because phase two is forested, that the number of trees that needed to be removed would result in a replacement ratio that would require additional land area to do it on versus being able to plant on phase two. So there was some consideration at that time. Could there be accommodation for additional landscaping trees on phase one? However, if I recall, we just went through this on another project, Summit at Thompson Creek. There actually isn't a formal replacement ratio for trees that are removed. So phase two, ultimately, if there is some form of replacement needed, can be handled on phase two. So I want to make sure phase one has no trees on it. It's completely flat, no trees, been farmed for years. And so
It is a great crop of Scotch broom, but apart from that.
right, yeah, right now it hasn't been farmed in a little bit, but anyway, so just to make sure that phase one will be landscaped per, I think it's C 6.1. And again, C 6.1 will be fine tuned, if you will, to meet city landscaping code and requirements. So on trees, I guess I'll pause there if there's any questions about the tree kind of separation or
No,
differentiation in
that
there.
answers that question. But as to landscaping then,
Yeah.
along the south boundary.
Yeah, so that was my next point, was just jumping over to the landscaping. In particular, fencing is not a required landscaping element, and we will be providing fencing as.
Required landscaping, but are not allowed.
Yes, and so we typically do some boundary landscaping with that includes fences. However, where and how those are placed is kind of it's subject to our I guess our desire or intent. More than likely, the boundary between this phase and phase two will not have a fence immediately, but as the other homes develop, maybe a fence goes in there. The southern boundary, honestly, that future right-of-way dedication, when the timing of that happens and when, how that goes, more than likely we would, when the homes are built, we may be building fences along that boundary line with tract F. However, in the immediate, there may not be a need for a fence. So any landscaping in that area would be, if you recall, there's perimeter landscaping requirements would be on lot, not in the tract. So the tract F is just purely set aside, no proposed anything. So speaking of fencing, so tract C, tract C is proposed as our open space and rec area. So it's recreation over an underground infiltration system. With, you can see here, pedestrian connections that extend between lots 33, 32, and pedestrian connections that connect Vancil Court southeast. So the existing neighborhood, we're giving pedestrian connection between lots through 4 and 5 and 17 and 16. Additionally, there's a Vancil Road frontage will be developed with.
Stop you there, Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor. So pedestrian connections to the track C via those two tracks.
Yep.
Is there a means of pedestrian access from the cul-de-sac to Vansel?
I don't think it's shown now. I don't. We wouldn't be opposed to necessarily including some sort of a pedestrian, surfacing there.
I assume one could simply walk across.
Right, it's it's gonna be grass. It's a grass field effectively, so there wouldn't be any, I guess, limitation to access there. So then, let's see, there was some discussion about Road C and connectivity, and yeah, while this plat stands on its own, there is some future consideration, recognizing that Morris Road is a relatively high volume arterial. We want to avoid cut throughs through the community to avoid traffic impacts to both our neighborhoods and the neighbors to the north of our project. So ideally with this configuration, there's fewer cut throughs. When the Yelm Loop is completed, there will be a much stronger arterial connection between Morris and traveling to the west. So at that point, we anticipate that traffic will naturally occur on those major thoroughfares versus trying any kind of cut through potential. But this helps to avoid and prevent that cut through action. So let's see. There was some discussion about this kind of being the boundary of the city and where it's situated. I want to be clear that kind of land use intensification in this area has trended towards, we've got a Safeway very nearby. I think it's walkable from this community. There's a lot of commercial nodes. So while it is a little more dense than the neighborhoods just directly to the north, it certainly fits within the land use intensification of the area and is appropriate, for this area, given that the zoning was established.
Let me just make the comment that I don't decide density.
Right.
City council decides it for me.
Correct.
And so I appreciate that they have recognized it as medium density.
Yeah, but it came up, so I just thought I'd bring up the land use intensification in the area has increased, and that kind of justified the change there. Hydrants are conceptually shown. If you look at sheet C 5.1, there's a conceptual plan for the hydrants. There was even a comment from the city on placement of those hydrants and location. So while that's conceptual and a formal water plan approval will be made by the city during civil engineering, there are hydrants shown. We've got one showing, oh gosh, we've got one down in front of lot 32. I think we have another one around the bend at the stub out to phase 2. Okay. So there's a handful of hydrants shown. And I believe there are some existing hydrants along Vansel Court. So they are shown, and again, spacing and location will be fine-tuned during civil engineering.
And since we're looking at C 5.1, the utility connection that was running to the whole.
Let me get back to sheet 5.1 so I can see. C5.1. So that's water main will be running across there. Yeah. So with the water, the intent is just to provide maximum looping and connection. And so, making that connection improves the overall water system for just make sure water gets circulated and doesn't get stagnant.
Okay.
And again, keeping phase 1 and 2 somewhat separate, we are showing utility stubs to phase 2 between in our road stub to the east. Let's see, and then the dedication for right of way along Vansel Road is 13 feet. That's shown on sheet C 1.1. If at the very bottom of sheet C 1.1, see, there's one more ahead there. There we go. There we go. In the bottom,
Go to C 2.4.
we'll go there in just a second. I just wanted to show. So if you look at the end of Vansel Road, you can actually see a measurement 13 feet down in the bottom left corner. Zoom in there. 13 feet. That's the dedication distance. So that was worked with. That was determined by and worked with the city. It was a discussion and we established that number with the city. So we're comfortable with dedicating that 13 feet. That we believe that will complete the road design for Vansel Road. And we'll be building from, you can see on this plan maybe. Anyway, we'll be building right there. You can see The existing improvements for Vansel Road on the west side, we'll be completing the east side, and so up to the point.
It's half road improvements.
Half road improvements our side, and effectively it will be a complete road, about halfway through the plat at that point. So Vansel Road will be a fully complete road, about halfway to the south of our property corner. Let's see, so safe walking was a discussion that I really want to make sure we touch on. In particular, this plat will be bused for all schools. At some point in the future, when phase 2 comes online, there may be potential for elementary school walking. Again, that discussion of the connection and connectivity outside of the city limits is open, but this plat, as it is designed, includes full, extra pedestrian connectivity with the tracks going through the lots, plenty of walkability to get to bus stops for school children who will be riding the bus. There are no schools aside from Prairie, which does not have, this plat does not have direct access to Morris. So
And because it doesn't have direct access, it sort of gets a free pass on the safe walking route requirement.
well, yeah.
Because it will be bused. And so I understand that.
So at some point, again, it likely will have the potential for walking to Prairie. Other than that, Scott, you mentioned C 2.4, if you wanted to see an additional cross section of that section of Vansel Road and the right of way. So that's another area you can look to. It was the dedication and what the ultimate Vansel Road build out will look like. That's neighborhood collector is what Vansel Road is qualified as. Other than that, sewer will be force main sewer. So effectively, whether that's step tanks or some future grinder tank or grinder pump solution.
I think it requires step.
It does currently, yep, and
We are in the process of accepting grinder pump, but it's not. So up now, we are only accepting the step tanks.
same design though, just to be clear, the in plat design for step and grinder pumps is the same. It's a low pressure force main system. So if at some point the plat were to have the opportunity to do grinder pumps versus step, it doesn't require any major significant changes to the infrastructure in the plat, but however, on the lot, that would be the change. Other than
Effectively allowing a much less hands-on process of managing solid waste.
correct, and a reduced footprint on the lot for a step tank and those kinds of items, so potential value there. Other than that, I'm available for questions.
Give me a minute.
Yep.
No, Ms. Brown, I think you've addressed the questions that I would pose to city staff, and I don't have any additional ones exclusively of the applicant, so I appreciate that. Were you anticipating any additional presentation for the applicant?
No, not today. Thank you.
That concludes the applicant's presentation. We're now at the public hearing. Cooper. Okay, let's have you sworn.
No place at the table, so I'll come there.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth.
I do. So I'm Gary Cooper, Planning and Building Manager with the city, and I just want to make clear that although these are two separate applications and technically they're separate projects from an environmental standpoint, we don't review them in isolation. So under SEPA, if there's a reasonable likelihood that they're both going to develop, we do at least need to consider the potential combined environmental impacts of the projects. I don't think that's a huge issue here, but just for the record, SEPA discourages and even prohibits segmenting of proposals if there's a reasonable likelihood that they're both gonna develop. So I think 197.11.305, and then I forget beyond that. Mandates that anything that's physically and functionally related should be reviewed together.
Well, that's important to simply to, in defense of the two DNSs.
Yeah.
And that they were considered in a collective fashion and found not to collectively not have a significant impact.
Right, so I don't really see, like I said, big, huge issue, but just for the record, the city doesn't review things environmentally like that.
Understood.
You know, traffic might be the main issue as far as the two combined ones. I don't see stormwater as being an issue. We're not concerned so much about the trees, but so you know.
That's a useful point. Thank you. Now turning to the public hearing, this is the opportunity for members of the public to be heard if there is any such wish, or, yes, sir.
Hello, I'm Chuck Markey,
And, Mr. Markey, how do I spell your last name?
Markee. I live out in Berkland.
Let me get. So you're just one block to the north.
Right.
Right. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the
I
truth?
do.
Go ahead.
I have two comments and some of them have already been somewhat addressed, but I still got to air it. I'm concerned about the traffic. Right now, we've got 4 businesses down there at in the Bansal and Yelm Highway sharing 3 driveways and a turn at the very same time. Since they opened up that other pot shop there, it's been a constant concern to me and others, and have seen accidents of a lot of traffic. There's just a lot of traffic there. Now we're going to and have all these other people. Now I'm all for progress. There's a lot more people up here with 59 plots here. There's gonna be a lot more traffic coming down that area. I'm really concerned about the fact that if, God forbid, there's ever any kind of catastrophe up behind Safeway towards Berkland where I live, we're isolated. We have no way out. No access at all out there. And that goes for the people living there and also emergency services. I'm concerned about that. And I think it's kind of short-sighted not to put a road in really right away, as soon as possible for that access. My second concern is water. And I don't know if they're gonna plan on putting any kind of additional pumping station up to keep the flow of water up. But I can tell you for a fact that in the evening, you don't have enough water up there sometimes at Berkland to hardly water your lawn. It won't run a sprinkler. And so additional into that same water main. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I know that increased use is gonna have lower flow. And that, I think, should be concerned. That's all I got.
Thank you. Before inquiring if there are other members of the public present, turn to staff. On water pressure, do we have a known water pressure issue for that area?
So based on the data that I have from the water study and the pressure, static pressure that we have at the end of Vansel is 45. And the residual pressure is 20 PSI, which is past the minimum requirement of the state. The applicant, by the time of civil plan, they're gonna provide a fire flow study that also provide that information that, okay, this development can supply that meet the fire flow requirement also.
So the timing on that is that before construction would get underway, the applicant would be
Basically-
required to do the fire flow study.
By the time of civil plan, before it's gonna be approved, they need to show that the pressure is gonna be enough for that
And
development.
to achieve adequate fire flow, you're achieving adequate potable water supply.
Yes.
Are there any other members of the public wishing to be heard? The record will reflect that there are none. I appreciate Mr. Marquis's concerns. It is a bit concerning that we have a neighborhood that is to some extent isolated, although not in a legal way. Nonetheless, I'd be a bit concerned too, but it's not a sufficient enough justification that I can impose an off-site duty, as it's been noted. The two projects are independent with independent ownership, and I cannot impose a road upon someone else's property. And so both points well taken. The water point seems to be addressed by the fact that this property must undertake and pass a water test, pressure test before work gets underway. I'm otherwise satisfied that the application has met all requirements. And I've been thinking about, is there anything that hasn't been sufficiently addressed in the as amended set of proposed conditions? There are maybe a few boilerplate conditions found commonly in the Yelm's subdivisions, but nothing substantive. And so while I may determine that some conditions found in every one of Yelm subdivision, if not found currently, will be added, but nothing that substantively changes the obligations or the conditions of the project. I'm going to go ahead and approve this phase as recommended, again, subject only perhaps to the addition of any standard form conditions that aren't currently shown in the proposed list. As all those who are involved know, although I've orally entered that decision, it's not yet effective. It becomes effective when I reduce my decision to a set of findings of fact, which then support a set of conclusions of law, which then support the decision itself, subject to the conditions that are being imposed. And that takes a few days to prepare. And so those will probably be out sometime next week, certainly by the end of next week. And so I'll get underway on that ASAP. Which brings us then to the second hearing today, which is the phase 2 of Country Meadows Estates. And just give me a minute to change some paperwork.
Excuse me, Mark, one final note for phase 1, we received a public comment yesterday over email, and this was emailed to your office this morning, so it can be entered to the record, but I do have a paper copy if you'd like it.
Okay, I wish you had told me about that a little bit sooner. That's all right. Let me take a look at it. Well, it's a statement by Mr. Bill Wyman, a nearby property owner, expressing concern over primarily the density of not only this project, but related projects or surrounding projects. As I explained or commented in Mr. Mann's testimony, I'm not a decider of density. I don't get to make that decision. Nobody voted me into this position. I'm not an elected official to decide policy matters. That's city council who decides density, and density has been determined to be of a medium level in this neighborhood. And this project is entirely consistent with its given density. So having fallen within its parameters, I'm not in a position to determine that that was ill-conceived by the council. And so that's done in their wisdom. They have chosen that level of density. I'm obligated to abide by it. And therefore I respect the concern, but it's not one that I can factor into my decision-making. And so it doesn't alter what I had just stated as to my decision. Thank you, Ms. Markey. We'll turn then to the second hearing, which is the public hearing for Country Meadows Estates Phase 2. It bears the city's file number 2023. property located along Morris Road Southeast. Street address. In advance of this hearing, I have again received the staff report, again authored by County, and again with a supplement received yesterday afternoon. I reviewed both the staff report and its supplement, and would note that many of the public comments have been associated with both projects and have been lumped together in as attachments to each of the reports. I have reviewed all of those public comments in advance of today's hearing. Once again, this is a public hearing for purposes of hearing from city staff, followed by the applicant, followed then by members of the public. And so let's get us underway. Oh, and I have undertaken a site visit, which led to a 15-minute wait to get back out of that site off of Morris Street. Maybe that was the pedestrian painting, striping that was going on. I don't think so. I think that's the standard at that intersection. I think I was in a queue of at least 30 that grew to 50, waiting to get onto Bald Hill and onto the highway. So just noting that as part of my site inspection. So we'll once again begin with the testimony of city staff. Tony, let's have you sworn again. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
I'm going to begin again by asking that the staff report with supporting documents be entered into the record. Supporting documents, please see the checklist, the application, stormwater report, geotech report, the traffic impact analysis, a Mazama pocket gopher. As well as public comments.
Duly noted and accepted into the record. Yes, thanks.
So as Mr. Mann stated earlier, phase 2 is meant to be an independent project from phase 1. Phase 2 will accommodate 29 single-family homes. And it is zoned R6, which is the moderate or medium density residential. When phase 2 is constructed, it will be connected to phase 1 by road C, which can be found in phase 1. But that won't happen until construction of phase 2. Construction of phase 2 is anticipated to start in spring of 2025. Other than the information that was reviewed for phase 1, the only thing that really truly is separate is the intersection at Bald Hill Road, Creek Street, and Morrison Road. And that is an intersection that does have some concern for the city. There are plans to improve that intersection, but at this time, they don't have a funding source for those improvements. They are asking the applicant to contribute to that when that time does come. And that has been addressed through the SEPA process.
Anything else, Ms.?
That's it.
Well, and the TIA also suggests that there be no connection to Morris Street until then. And see no reason why I won't do that. I want to give fair notice. I'm not dumping more cars into a road that no one can even get out of.
Absolutely.
So if I approve this, it will be on the condition that there be no immediate connection to Morris other than for emergency and pedestrian purposes. Mr. Wiebe.
Yes, just on that subject, we did add a 19th condition in our recommendations for approval. Sorry for the last minute.
Also, it's not part of yesterday's stuff.
It is not part of the revised staff report, unfortunately, but I do have a paper copy of this condition. In broad terms, it does try to address that restriction on access from.
See that?
Yes. Yes.
That is consistent with what I had just declared. So, on tract A in the northeast corner, open space tract, how is it envisioned?
Go to my notes. Tract A, again, is open space with underground stormwater. It should also be an active recreational area. And it would be the same with tract B, that should also be open recreational area.
Oh, in the southwest quarter.
In the southwest.
So both are intended for similar purposes.
They are, yes. But stormwater will be contained primarily or retreated primarily on tract A.
In sheet sheet C 6.1, it shows a significant number of trees located in both tracts as well as along the south boundary of the site. These suggest by their location and identification to be existing firs to be retained, or is that imaginary? No,
I do not know the answer to that.
I'll ask the
Yeah,
applicant.
the applicant would be better suited to answer that. I would anticipate that they're going to need to be removed in order to provide infrastructure.
Well, it's describing 27 retained trees. Each C 6.1 is. And did not give a icon. Oh, there it is. It's deciduous trees. To be determined. Oh, okay. I'll have that. Yeah, I guess there's a combination of existing conifers being retained and existing deciduous trees being retained. I'll have that explained a little bit more fully. But it at least suggests a significant amount of tree retention in the southwest and northeast corners, as well as along the south boundary. And I'll again come back to that through the applicant. So again, walking to schools. Anticipate Mr. Mann noting that this is also going to require busing, even though it's within 300 yards of the elementary school. Is that what the city is currently envisioning?
I don't know that the city has a position on that.
Do you know?
We don't have any plan at this time.
I'm not sure what I'm doing with, or what to do with this. If I'm a fourth grader, why don't I want to walk to school if I live in lot 29? And yet, if I'm to get to the school, I'm putting my life at risk. With no plan, no crossroad or crossing, no sidewalk, no protection of any kind, and yet I could almost hit the school with a rock from where I live. So, and we have a state mandate that safe walking routes are to be taken into consideration if subdivisions are to be approved. So where does that leave us with this application?
I would anticipate that that would be addressed during the improvements to the interchange at Bald Hill Road, Creek Street and Morrison Road. Or no, am I off base with that?
I'm not sure yet at this point.
Okay. Silence is deafening on this issue. I'll come back to it with the applicant, but let me see if I have any other questions. Again, do you know if there's any dedication required along Morris? No, it's not. And once again, there would be half street improvements along Morris. That's what's anticipated. And in Morris as a collector street allows no parking, is that correct? I don't think I have any other. So if you can go back to the.
Actually, his laptop has given up the ghost, so. Let's see if we can come up with it here. Hey, Clayton.
Yes.
What do you need to share?
It's on the projects folder. It's that site. Mr. Scheidmeier, it should be noted that the applicant's representative Kurt has expressed an interest to chime in, so he's raised his hand over the virtual meeting, so.
Okay,
When you're ready, we can take his comment.
thank you. And so this is a virtual, this is a hybrid hearing.
That is correct.
Okay. Going back to the last hearing, did the city have any evidence of participants remotely?
There were no attendants in the last hearing. Besides Kurt.
What I'm trying to find out about, and it may or may not require pulling a plat, is the driveways coming off of road B to reach the properties along the north boundary. Are the to reach lots 14, 13, 7, and 6. And whether those are intended as pass-throughs or simply it's intended to reach those properties. In other words, was any connectivity envisioned with the property to the north via these driveways, or were they simply means of private access?
I do not believe that there was any anticipation that they be connected to the properties to the north, the off-site properties.
Actually flag lots.
They are flag lots, yes.
Oh, I see that. My confusion is that the sheets show the building locations, which suggest that make it appear as if those are separate strips. Okay. So again, while connectivity is envisioned to the development to the west, none is envisioned to the north or south.
That's correct.
How does that play with the city's policies? The property to the north, as I recall, right by seems imminently developable. as residential, perhaps even commercial. Does the city have any particular policies on connection to it? Or how is it zoned currently? Do you know?
I don't know, but I do know that once this tract C, or excuse me, road C, once it's connected all the way through, it does connect to Vansel. And so there would be some connection to the north going through the other development.
Oh, I recognize that.
But nothing directly from this property.
Connectivity has multiple concepts. One is simply pass through. The other is making sure all developments connect to each other, so there's a sense of community.
Oh.
It's R6.
Okay, so it's zoned similarly, and so at least it's anticipated for like development. Does the city have a official connectivity policy? We have it in Olympia. This property would be connected to that neighborhood.
We don't have any specific plan, but we have a guideline that if there's a potential, which we don't see here.
If you had a known project proposed for development, you would take it into consideration. But lacking a known project despite its zoning for development, that doesn't trigger a requirement for consideration. Okay. I don't think I have any other questions of staff, so we'll turn to the applicant. And it's indicated that one of its representatives is online, and that is Kurt, and the last name? Wilson. Let's begin with Mr. Wilson. Is that what's suggested? Or-
Yeah, let's get Kurt go first.
Mr. Wilson, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And you've heard the testimony of city staff, my questions of staff, as a representative for the applicant, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to address 2 points. First of all, the traffic mitigation, the SEVA mitigation measure contemplates a contribution at the point in time when the city has a project designed and actually construction costs tied to that. I'd just like to say that, but note that the timing of that is unknown at this point. And so it's, I believe, and the city can confirm this, that it's contemplated that this project, given that it's a city project on its TIP, would be added to the traffic impact overall fees in the city, and a proportionate share may in the future be paid via the increased transportation fee when the project is added with an actual construction budget. Because there may be a timing issue here, so just wanted to put that out there for discussion as far as the timing for us to build the project and where that contribution might come from. It may be a building permit when fees are paid for traffic rather than at the time of development. But maybe the city could either confirm that or elaborate. Secondly, on the school walkway, I appreciate you bringing that up because we are always concerned for our future homeowners and the communities. We try to set things up for them to enjoy with parks, and when there are schools in the vicinity, making sure that we are addressing issues, particularly with safe walk when we can. And in this case, I don't recall receiving comments from the school district specifically saying that they had concerns with this being a required walk route neighborhood or connection. Furthermore, the design contemplated with the frontage improvements would have barricades at either end of the sidewalk, which would be real clear evidence that there's no anticipation of leaving the frontage in a safe manner until sidewalk is extended in the future by future development. So in other jurisdictions where we've done this, there's either a request because there's actually a school walking route that's identified where we might have to fill in a gap as mitigation. But in this case, I don't recall the school district engaging, and we do know that Vansel area currently is where the bus would occur. So it's our expectation that in the interim, phase two students going to school would either be transported by their parents or taking the bus from the Vansel area and walking that in that direction. So just wanted to give you some more feedback on kind of the way we were envisioning this.
Okay, I do appreciate all of those comments. I'm still thinking about that fourth grader, lot 29, who pops out to the sidewalk, sees the barricade and just jumps across the street, and walks along the west side of, a no sidewalk, Morris Street to get to a grade school. I can't let that thought won't, leave my head. It's causing me great consternation, but I get the points and I appreciate them. Mr. Mann, you've been sworn, but we'll have you sworn again. Do you swear firm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Go ahead.
To Mr. Wilson's point, another thing that needs to be considered, I want to say, and I need clarification from the city. There was some discussion that WashDOT may be participating in that roundabout effort as well. So they're funding, and where that comes from, we'll need clarification from the city. It is our intent that until those improvements are complete, we would not have access, and that was actually considered in our SEPA, was that removing access to Morris in the interim until those improvements are done would avoid any of our impact going there, and effectively the traffic impact fee that we would pay would be our contribution. But again, the question for the city is, I swear I recall in our discussions that maybe WashDOT was already providing funds for that, so the need for this project to contribute may not be necessarily there. Other than that, the comments that in discussion came up, pretty much all have been addressed. Tract A serving as open space and a storm facility, underground infiltration, detention and infiltration. Tract B serving as a recreation track. Connectivity through phase two for both water and sewer. Water ideally improves the overall water system with connectivity, and effectively at that point, the water improvements we make potentially improve any water pressure concerns that neighbors have mentioned in the previous hearing. So water connecting all the way through creates, again, further looping and for further opportunity for improvements to both water pressure. As it relates to the pipe stems that are serving lots 6, 7, 13, and 14. So you'll see on sheet C 1.1 that we've extended that 20-foot easement for utilities and ingress and egress all the way to the north boundary. The reason for that is typically neighbors sharing a pipe stem or whatnot have some crossover at point of where they enter their property. So turning movements, we don't want that 20-foot easement to terminate in a way that would have one neighbor driving onto the other neighbor's property without an easement. So in an effort to avoid that, we extend that easement all the way to the north boundary so that they have a shared basically drive or easement all the way to the boundary. That makes sense. Just helps avoid turning movements on someone else's property. But no proposed future connectivity to the north at this time. And part of that reason is the property to the north is rather large and has significant frontage along Morris, as well as along there's a side road, and I don't recall what the road name is, but there's an additional road that is kind of to the northeast that property would effectively have significant ability to connect to the city's network.
It's not for purposes of connecting to the network so much as not creating silo neighborhoods. Yeah.
Other than that, yeah, no other comment.
Okay. Thought I had one, and that's just escaped me. Oh, It's just an observation. I think I mentioned Olympia a minute ago. That's just one aspect had been in Olympia. The tree contribution, this project would have been impressive in Olympia. Staggering, but again, that's a different community with a different policy toward trees. So, what do you envision as tree retention?
Yeah, so if you look at tract A, it's a kind of a flag shaped lot. The rear larger portion of tract A is actually all tree retention proposed. There's some minor boundary tree retention proposed at the rears of lots 24 and 25. And then some additional tree retention in tract B near our recreation area. So shade trees for our recreation areas, as well as retention in areas that won't require grading.
So not so much landscaping as simply retention of existing conditions at the northeast and southwest, as well as some of the southern boundary.
Certainly that's what it looks like, but we landscape our open space tracks pretty darn well. They're the selling point of the community. So
it's not derogatory in any way. It wasn't.
Oh, yeah. So yes, they're specifically tree retention. We dress them up and then we add additional landscaping during civil design.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions.
Thank you.
Just gonna, well, I'm sorry, anything else from the applicant? And let's turn to the public. Are there any members of the public present? There are none in the room. Are there any remotely? Okay. Having heard the applicant's presentation, does he have any response? I want to make a general angry comment about school districts and their indifference toward projects that have tremendous impact upon them, yet they do not participate. Yelm is just one of jurisdictions in which school impacts are of enormous importance to what I'm doing, and yet I don't get a peep out of a school district anywhere, as if it's not their problem. And that really angers me, that I'm making decisions affecting children, yet the ones who are their guardians are opting out of being spokespeople. And so leaving me in positions where I've got to make decisions without good solid information or direction from those who are safeguarding those people. It would really be nice to hear from the school district on how it envisions some of these things being taken care of, or to establish a safe walking route for a school that currently has none. But that leaves us where we are. I do appreciate that these have been addressed in the application and the materials and the city's response. I'm not overwhelmed by the response, but I see it as good, or as good as it can be under the circumstances. And therefore it has been addressed as is required by the state law. I was going to have a problem with any proposed access to Morris, but the parties anticipated that and resolved it for me by proposed condition 19. And so
One point where could we have condition 19 read into the, just so we can all make sure we're
okay. Thank you. That is so proposed condition 19 is: given the deficient level of service, LOS, and collision rate, if the city plan improvements along Bald Hills Road and SR 507 are not completed by the time of Country Meadows Estates Phase 2 build outs, and Country Meadows Estates Phase 1 has completed its plan improvements providing access from Vanceville Road, then the proposed Morse Road site access shall be restricted to emergency vehicles only via bollards, a gate, or similar means. Consequently, all traffic from Country Meadows Estates Phase 1 and 2, assuming the improvements to Bald Hill Road, Morris Road, SR 507 are not complete, must use Vanceville Road, which was determined to have sufficient capacity to support both phases of Country Meadows Estates. I guess I should have read this a little closer because it has an opt-out for Phase 2 using Morris if Phase 1 is constructed. And I'm not comfortable with that.
I think it says it doesn't have access basically stating that phase one must be completed for phase two to have access to Morris.
No, it does. It says, it's on the condition that Country Meadows. The limitation is conditioned upon Country Meadows having been constructed. So if Country Meadows hasn't been constructed, this condition does not apply, and it would allow access to Morris. And that language, I'm gonna require, I'm gonna revise. I'm not gonna allow this development to occur with an access to Morris, unless there's been improvement, as required, until it's no longer at LOSF. So I'm going to revise 19, to some extent to make the development of this phase conditioned upon either access out of Ansel or upon improvements at the interchange such that it's no longer operating in a failed LOS.
Yeah, as long as it's either, that works for us, just that in that if phase one is built, it has sufficient access out, and we would limit with bollards or like. And then if phase one is not built, but Morris improvements have been done.
I'm just going to take the condition that there'll be no access to Morris. I'm not gonna have the additional condition that somehow phase one have been constructed. It's simply not gonna have an access unless it has that access.
Unless it has the improvements complete or the connection through Ansel. Okay, thank you.
And I'm not sure where my comments were prior to that. I do not find any other conditions needing to be imposed, other than, again, I may, similar to phase one, review what have been standard conditions found in other recent Yelm subdivisions and see if there are any ones that are non-substantive, that are simply standard expectations of the city that do not impose additional burdens, unannounced burdens on the applicant, just so that there's consistency in the city's subdivision requirements. But subject to all those things, go ahead and approve this application. And once again, that means converting it to findings, conclusions, and decision, and that will be done shortly after phase one. So again, by later than the end of next week. Are there any last questions about that? If not, thank you, and we're adjourned.